Okay, well, Aliens was a bust. Perhaps Predator will be more to my liking. I am probably setting myself up for failure. It's another omnibus. I didn't look to see how long it is. Um, and it's from Dark Horse. I don't know if it's the same writers or not, but uh, I'm a bigger Predator fan than I am an Alien fan. I find the Predator a much more interesting character. I've only seen Predator 1 and 2. I didn't see Predators, which came out a few years ago. Would have liked to, I just never got around to it. I like Predator 2. It's not nowhere near as good as the first one, but I still felt it was enjoyable and tried to do something different. Again, I'm assuming this collection is not just a retelling of the movies, but takes place in the universe of the movies and tells different stories, and hopefully tells them competently with interesting characters and good art. So, oh, please don't suck. This one is even longer than Aliens. Aliens was almost 400 pages. Predator is over 400 pages. Luckily, Predator doesn't completely suck. Predator was alright. I didn't mind the read. It was a long, but a fairly brisk read, except for one part, which I'll get to. So, it starts out in the city, New York, and there's two rival gangs are meeting somewhere to discuss a collaboration of some sort, and they can rule the city. And then a predator pops in and ruins their day, and then the cops show up and they're like, oh man, these gang wars are getting out of hand. Look, we've got skinned people hanging upside down. And our hero cop, I don't think this was rival gang. I think we're dealing with something else. And at this point I'm thinking, are we just doing Predator 2? And then the comic introduces the main cop, and it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, they're calling him Schaefer, but that's Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I think about it, and I'm like, what was Dutch's actual name in Predator? So I looked it up real quick. Alan Schaefer. So I'm like, okay, so we're doing Predator 2, but with Dutch instead of what was Danny Glover's name in that movie? Mike Hannigan? Something like that. I thought, okay, interesting choice. Come to think of it, I don't know when this book was written, so it's very possible the comic came first, and the movie took the idea of took the premise of the comic book and went from there. It turns out that this is actually not Dutch. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger from the original Predator movie. This is Dutch's brother, who I think we just know as Schaefer, Detective Schaefer, throughout the entire run. At least the first omnibus, anyway. So I found that interesting. So the first story is Dutch 2, Detective Schaefer, figuring out what him and his buddy cop partner, figuring out that it's aliens, and they end up teaming up with some drug dealing gang banger ne'er-do-wells to take on the Predator. Probably the most interesting part to me was the Schaefer's detective buddy, his partner, ends up with one of the Predator masks as evidence. And he's just playing with it, and he goes to the window and he puts it on, and there's like a dozen predator ships hovering over the city, but they're cloaked, but he can see it because he's staring through the mask. Very They Live, you know. That was a really cool idea. That when the hunt is on, it's not just one lone predator coming down. It's there's a whole hunting party, and they're just hanging out there. It kind of explains why, if I'm remembering correctly, there was a thing about while the predator was there, reception on televisions and stuff was terrible. Maybe I'm totally misremembering that, but it's a thing in the comic book. And the reason is because there's a bunch of damn big spaceships hovering over the city, blocking the satellite signals. So that was funny. And so it gets into a big war between Schaefer and his partner and a bunch of the gang peoples and a few predators. And he ends up like shooting several fire hydrants to shoot water into the street. That shorts out the predators' cloaking so that it's more of a fair fight. There's some pretty nice action beats. The second story was probably my favorite. It goes to Russia, and there's apparently a predator ship just kind of has a damaged part and crashes somewhere in like Siberia. And there's a Russian group stationed at an outpost in Siberia, and they go investigate, and they all get slaughtered except for one person. And she goes back and she tells the story of what she saw, and the government military peoples are like, "Oh, you're tall tales. You're gonna work out at outposts for the rest of your life, you horrible military person making up stories about monsters and things." And so the government kind of recruits, hears about the predators and recruits not Dutch to advise, and he goes out there and teams up with the Russian military person to hunt down the predators. But then there's it's almost like Aliens, in where you get a rival organization that wants to steal bits of alien technology, so they don't want to kill all the predators and make them go home without getting some new toys to play with. And that one's a pretty fun tale too. The third one, Dutch is still trying to find his brother because his brother's been missing, and he follows some leads and ends up in the jungle with some other people and fights more predators. And it's at this point I was thinking, you know, these stories kind of get a little samey. Predator comes down, bunch of people die, Dutch comes in, not Dutch comes in rather, joins up with a new group of people, most of them die, kill the predator, and that's it. The characters change, the setting changes, and don't get me wrong, oftentimes that's absolutely enough, but it's pretty much the same beats every time, and it can get a little stagnant. From then on, I think it's smaller stories that don't star not Dutch, though. My biggest criticism really is the not Dutch character. They go way overboard with action hero quippy, classic late 80s, early 90s Schwarzenegger, like his John Matrix character in Commando. That guy is completely unrealistic. No one can touch him. He stands out in the middle of an open field. There's a bunch of people shooting at him. No one can hit him. He just stands there, mows them all down. He has a quip for everything. The not Dutch in the comic is like John Matrix to the 10th power. I mean, oh my God. This guy gives not a care in the world about anything. Let me restate that. He quips so much that it comes across that he just doesn't care about anything that goes on. Everything he says is a complete joke or quip, to the point where he almost seems like a complete sociopath. He so does not care or empathize with anyone or anything, to the point where the stories kind of start recognizing that by the second story, and people start calling him out on that. Like, Schaefer, do you not care about anyone or anything? Because you're coming off as kind of cold and callous. And then the stories start circling back around on that and saying, well, he's been lied to and screwed over, and the government is lying to us, and everything's a lie. It's a big fat joke. So he's just kind of broken, and it's a defense mechanism, and that's why he doesn't care. It's like, not totally smoothly handled, but the seeds of it are there. It's actually not a bad idea. It's kind of interesting. So, not a bad series. It goes on to follow some other stories. One is... It actually follows the... No, it's a different guy. There is... predator activity. Some guy gets blamed. And then a guy who's he's his lawyer or something, tries to defend him. And then he's like, this sounds like something before. And he goes to the library or looks online. He's like, wow, this is the same thing. Maybe he's not crazy. And then he goes to some other person who can give him information. And she's like, yes, I have this other story that I remember that's like exactly the same thing. He's like, well, there are 2 other cases. And then he finds out from some third party. He gets a diary of some soldier in World War II. And he reads the entire damn diary about this soldier's experience in World War II, where they were out in the trenches fighting the other guys, and there was a predator running around causing havoc. Cool idea. The problem is it goes on too long. It's like 10 pages too long. That's the worst part of the entire omnibus. At that point, I got really bored of that story because it just went on and on and on and on and on. But so he concludes that, okay, the guy in prison is not crazy. There is something going on here, and we've actually got some proof of that. Because not only was the... Because later he gets a care package, which was some of the soldier guys... old stuff, including a Predator helmet. Proof! Unfortunately, he gets a note that the guy in prison took his own life. But we know that the government silenced him. Not a bad story. The last story, I think, is... It takes place in Japan. And it's this guy and his buddy... I can't remember names at all. So there's this blind guy who's working with a partner who's to make like some type of visual... I don't know if it's supposed to be glasses or an implant or what, but it's a piece of technology to help blind people see. So he's working with this... I have no idea what she is. I'm not sure if she's like a researcher, a robotics person. It's never really clear. But anyway, so he's working with another person to make a heat sensing, so predator vision for blind people so that they can see. Okay, that's neat. So are we going to have a blind person with predator vision fight a predator with predator vision? Not exactly. Here's the thing. His ancestor, back in feudal Japan, hundreds of years ago, was a blind guy who fought a predator and killed it. Well, now that predator's brother, I guess they lived to be hundreds of years old, has come back to take revenge on his ancestor. Okay. And our modern-day blind guy actually kind of remembers this somehow. I guess he's been reincarnated. And he can also sometimes kind of see in predator vision, even though his partner never actually she hasn't made the technology yet. So it's kind of weird. And then he has like psychic premonitions of where they need to go to fight the predator. Suddenly psychic stuff, magic-y kind of stuff, reincarnation kind of stuff, grudges against ancestors. That story got a little weird. I'm all for pushing the boundaries, but this one felt like it kind of stepped outside the boundaries of the Predator universe. I don't know. Not a terrible story, it was just kind of weird. Anyway, he ends up hacking off the Predator's head with a sword, and there's like 6 Predators who are cloaked standing in. They're like, alright, well, that's that. Bye! That's the kind of neat thing about the Predators is they have their own code of honor. They're sportsmen in a way. You know, they rarely go after unarmed or really old or children or really sick people. They're going after the big game. But there was one story where there was just one Predator asshole who just liked killing. You know, no sense of honor, no code, just killed everything. Probably every other Predator hates that guy. That's like Melvin the Predator. We don't like Melvin. Oh, we have a code, sure. What about Melvin? He's an asshole. So that was interesting. So really, and there's like 7 or 8 omnibuses for Predator. So this series went on for a long time. I only read the first omnibus, but not too bad. Enjoyable enough. Aliens, I thought, was pretty terrible. But Predator, not too bad. Not too bad. It was a fine read. So, that's it for today's comic. See you tomorrow.